I'm Will Dove, and this is the IWR News for the week ending August 23rd. In our top stories this week, is the Kursk invasion a setup? A Canadian woman is arrested for online posts. Record low birth rates are recorded in the U.S., and the two remaining Coutts 4 members who were acquitted 2 weeks ago are still in prison. Those and 9 more stories that mainstream media won't report, and our government doesn't want you to hear. The Ukrainian invasion of Kursk has slowed in the past week, with Ukrainian forces making little progress as Russian resistance increases. Now there is evidence that the Kursk invasion may have been a setup on both sides. First, we have evidence that NATO forces were involved in the Ukraine offensive. An aide to President Vladimir Putin claimed in the Russian press last Friday that NATO and the West were directly involved in the planning of last week's incursion, while the White House said it had nothing to do with it earlier this week. Americans, who provide the biggest chunk of foreign weapons to Ukraine, still face urgent questions. Does this advance move the set limits on how Ukraine can use its U.S. and NATO arsenal? Does it risk crossing Russia's red lines over Western involvement in the war? Then there is the possibility that the Kursk region was left underdefended on purpose. Scott Ritter is an American former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer, former United Nations Special Commission weapons inspector, author, and commentator. In a recent online interview, Ritter claimed that he is in contact with a high-ranking Russian military official known as Apty, who has confirmed the invasion was orchestrated by NATO.
But it's not even Ukraine invading Russia. You see, the force that's going in is a force that's hand-built by NATO. I just interviewed a Russian senator. He's the head of the Veterans Committee, very close to Putin, very close to the Ministry of Defense, and he's down in Kursk right now. And he said, you know, we being the Russians, have captured a lot of equipment and a lot of people, and we're putting it together. He said this group that came in is equipped to the highest modern NATO standards, better than most NATO units. They use full spectrum dominance theories. They have Starlink connectivity at the vehicle level, sometimes at the small unit level. And all of this is fed up through satellites down to, back down to the command staff to get real-time location. They can track the movement of their forces. They have real-time intelligence coming in saying where the Russians are, and they use artificial intelligence to not only maneuver, but to deploy new drones, a new generation of drones, high-speed drones, AI-driven drones that flood the battlefield. This is the NATO army, the Polish-speaking, French-speaking, English-speaking NATO army that invaded Russia at the command of NATO.
If Ritter is correct, in the coming weeks we will see Russia push the Ukrainian invaders out, and not only recapture the invaded region, but likely take more territory as well. In 2014, Russia annexed the Crimea, and during the 2022 invasion, Russia captured large swaths of southeastern Ukraine and is continuing to make headway there. Russia's military said it has captured a small town in eastern Ukraine called New York as part of its push towards big population centers in the Donetsk region. New York is just south of the mining town of Turets, and Russian forces on Monday said they had also captured Zalizny, to the southeast of Turets. Ukrainian forces said they were still fighting back in Zalizny, and local sources were quoted as saying they still had control of 20% of New York, too, although they had far fewer reserves than the Russians. On Monday, Ukrainian authorities ordered the evacuation of Pokrovsk, as Russian forces continued to advance on the town where some 53,000 people still live. Prior to the 2022 invasion, the population of Pokrovsk was almost 83,000. Did NATO plan the Kursk offensive? Did Russia intentionally leave that area underdefended to provide an excuse to push back even harder and to possibly grab yet more Ukrainian territory? If either of these things are true, it is evidence that the Russia-Ukraine conflict has roots that run much deeper than just those two countries. 2 weeks ago, I told you about UK citizen Jordan Parler, 28, who was the first man to be arrested for a post on Facebook. Parler has since been sentenced to 20 months in prison. Parler pled guilty to publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred when he urged rioters to target the Britannia Hotel, a location used to house asylum seekers. Parler is the first person to be jailed over online posts linked to the riots, which began following the killing of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift dance party in Southport. In one such post, Parler wrote that immigrants, quote, rape our kids and get priority, which is true. At the time, I told you that the UK is our canary in the coal mine for violations on our freedom of speech. I didn't know how right I was. Only a day or two after Parler was arrested, a Canadian woman was also arrested for an online post. A Chilliwack, BC woman has been arrested over what police are describing as racially offensive content she shared via social media. Police say the woman was arrested on August 7th, but has since been released to appear in court at a later date while prosecutors consider, quote, several possible recommended charges. Police declined to share the suspect's name or the account she allegedly used. RCMP spokeswoman Corporal Carmen Kiner says the account on X, formerly known as Twitter, was brought to the attention of police by concerned citizens and members of the media. She said the woman was allegedly targeting members of the South Asian community, adding investigators learned of several examples but believe one person is responsible for all the content. Note that Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, has not yet been passed. While we have very few details on this arrest, it shows that the draconian bill is not necessary. As was recently pointed out by JCCF President John Carpe in a post he wrote, all of the actual potential harms supposedly addressed by Bill C-63 are already illegal under the criminal code. If the arrested woman was inciting hatred towards an identifiable ethnic group, that is covered under Section 319.1. If she was advising violence against a particular person or group, that is covered under Section 22. We don't know if the arrest of this woman was justified under the criminal code or not, because her identity has not been revealed, and thus our ability to find her posts, if they haven't been removed, is crippled. What we do know is that a woman has now been arrested in Canada for an online post. How long will it be before others are arrested for expressing their opinions online? An independent journalist in the United Kingdom has been arrested under terrorism laws upon his return to London. Richard Medhurst, an internationally accredited journalist with strong views against Zionist actions in Israel, was arrested on Thursday, August 15th, by 6 police officers in a move he described on his release as political persecution.
On Thursday, as I landed in London Heathrow Airport, I was immediately escorted off the plane by 6 police officers who were waiting for me at the entrance of the aircraft. They arrested me, not detained, they arrested me under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act of 2000 and accused me of allegedly, quote, expressing an opinion or belief that is supportive of a prescribed organization, unquote, but wouldn't explain what this meant. One officer took my bags, and when I asked why he was still back in the aircraft, I was told, look mate, you can get nicked right here in front of everyone, or in there, your choice. So I was taken to an adjacent room, patted down, my phone confiscated. I was not allowed to inform my family. Despite being calm and cooperative, I was handcuffed with something that placed my shoulders in an awkward position. The handcuffs were extremely tight. Despite the police loosening them, they left marks on me for 2 days. My suitcase was then opened in the lobby and ransacked. All of my journalistic equipment and devices were seized, including phones, SIM cards, wireless microphones, headphones, even my shoelaces. I was placed in solitary confinement in a cold cell that smelt like urine.
The new definition of terrorism now seems to include regime-critical journalism. Many people have been detained in Britain because of their connection to journalism, explained Medhurst, naming Julian Assange, Craig Murray, Kit Clarenberg, David Miranda, Vanessa Beeley, who have all been imprisoned, harassed, and detained by UK police for their journalism. Medhurst pointed out that he is the first journalist in the UK to be arrested and held under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. Medhurst says UK terror laws are out of control and have no place in a democracy, as they are used to muzzle reporting on issues such as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He argues that counter-terrorism laws should be used to fight actual terrorism, and not to have journalists dragged off planes and treated like murderers. Following the angry protests over the murder of 3 small girls by a man of Rwandan origin in Southport, another UK man, Wayne O'Rourke, was sentenced this past week to 3 years in prison on charges including anti-establishment rhetoric. It is vital to note that O'Rourke did not actually participate in the riots, but merely posted what could be interpreted as encouragement to his X account, where he had 90,000 followers. Statements posted included urging the people of Southport to get out on the street. Sunderland, go on, lads. Starmer has basically said it is us against them. Hold the line. That last is a reference to Labour Party opposition leader Keir Starmer. The protests, fueled by decades of ongoing organized child rape gangs, terror bombings, and murders by immigrant populations, were described by one former police chief as terrorism. Others have been imprisoned for protesting in person under terrorism charges. In the UK, the broad sweep of terrorism laws now provide for the arrest, detention, and imprisonment of anyone in open disagreement with the liberal global ideology. Canadian think tank secondstreet.org launched this past week a new resource to help Canadian patients with accessing health care. Patientoptions.ca. The new site helps patients learn about accessing health care in Canada's public system and private options in Canada and abroad. Canada desperately needs health reform to improve services for patients, but that takes time, said secondstreet.org President Colin Craig. Patientoptions.ca is a tool that can help patients today. For example, the site includes tips on things people can try to help speed up their long wait for surgery in the public system. Alternatively, patients can also find info on where they can pay for private surgery and diagnostic scans instead of going abroad for surgery. Visitors to the site can find the following information: tips on how to move their case up on a government waiting list, links to find a family doctor and wait times for walk-in clinics and emergency rooms, a directory of clinics that provide private surgery and diagnostic scans in Canada, information on the tax treatment of private health procedures, and links to insurance companies that cover private care abroad. Last week, we launched our petition at changed.org to support Bill C-400. The bill was introduced in June by Conservative MP Ted Falk and would not only protect our access to cash, but make CBDCs in Canada illegal. Over 3,100 signatures have been added in just 1 week. All of the plans of the globalists can be resisted over time, except for CBDCs. If they are allowed to implement central bank digital currencies along with social credit scores, they will be able to control us all. Where we can go, what we can do, what we can buy, and even where we can live. If you have not yet signed, please go to change.org and search for C400, or look below this report for the direct link. This report is just one example of the investigative journalism I bring you at ironwillreport.com. My efforts to bring you the truth with 2 exclusive interviews and 1 counter-narrative news report each week, as well as with special reports like my recent report on who really killed Thomas Crooks, are entirely funded by viewer subscriptions. I know it's difficult to get used to the idea of paying for news. Pretty much since radio and TV news started, we've been able to access it for free. But mainstream media can no longer be trusted. They are funded by our government and large corporations, and they work for them. Independent journalists, such as myself, work for our viewers. If you're not paying for your news, someone else is, and that someone else has an agenda. You can get a free 15-day trial at ironwillreport.com without a credit card. You will be granted instant access. See what you're missing at no cost and no obligation. Memberships are just $9.95 per month, or save 20% with a $99 annual membership. We also have 2 offline payment options for those of you concerned about government surveillance. In this week's members' version of the IWR news, police in 2 countries are seeking the power to search homes secretly, while residents are not home. Statistics Canada's own charts show the devastation of the COVID shots. A German study reveals that all COVID-vaxxed kids have compromised immune systems. Ford drops plans for an electric SUV. China is mass-producing humanoid robots. What could possibly go wrong? The global depopulation agenda, new alarming statistics. The acquitted Coutts 4 political prisoners are still in jail. and climate alarmists get caught manufacturing false data. Again. Over the summer, I'm slowing down a little and only releasing one interview per week. This is allowing me more time to work on other projects, such as this complete revamp of the IWR news. I will resume my regular schedule of 2 interviews per week in September. This week, on Sunday, Peter MacIsaac, author of the Amazon bestseller The Redneck Conservative, How Conservatives Are Made, on the parasitical growth in Canada of what he refers to as leftist libtards, and how they are destroying a once great country. But more importantly, Peter's book focuses on the values and actions that we as conservatives must preserve and practice to take back our country.